My name is Pete, and welcome to my garage. Hello and welcome back to Pete's Garage, where today I'm working on my 2011 Buick Regal. Now I am going to be fixing some oil leaks on this, but I'm also going to go ahead and change the timing chains. Now the timing chains are kind of notorious for having issues on these Ecotec engines, mostly the 2.4 liter engines that seem to have some oil consumption from the PCV system, which kind of seems like a similar thing that happens on our 3.6 liter engines. So check out that video that I talk about that up there. However, this one, the timing chains themselves are actually okay. However, we were running into codes for the camshaft solenoids or the camshaft position actuator system. The solenoids were getting clogged with debris. Now, if you ever look at these solenoids, and I'm going to show you what they look like, and the screens are filled with debris, chances are that debris came from one of the timing chain tensioners, because there will be little black flakes on that. And the only place that there's black plastic, I believe, in this engine is one of the timing chain tensioners. So I did buy a timing chain tensioner and chain component kit for this vehicle, and I'm going to go ahead and replace all that while I am fixing the oil leak on the vehicle. Okay, now this being a turbo engine, we have this beautiful beauty cover over the top. Now it is just a 4-cylinder. They tried to make it look like it was rear-wheel drive, but it's not. So just got to remove this cover here, which a lot of the hoses just clip into it. Hopefully I don't snap any of this off, because it does have 177,000 miles on it. There we go. All right, so this is looking very similar to a lot of other Ecotec engines once you get underneath this beauty cover right here. I am going to have to take off the intake system over here for the fresh air intake. I'll have to remove the ignition coils, unplug the cam solenoids, and remove a couple of these pieces up on the front. Okay, if you've never done this before, you would be amazed at how much room you can get access to the front of the engine just by removing a couple of pieces. So right now I'm going to remove this air box. And so these little clips right here, a lot of times they don't want to come out. This one came out real easy. You don't take it all the way out. You just move it back just a little bit, enough to push the tab, and so you can unplug the mass air meter. I see a lot of times people break those out and rip them out and don't ever put them back, but that's not the right way to do it. This one doesn't have a connector assurance, so it just pushes the little tab, pops off. That's for our barometric pressure sensor right there. We'll tuck those connectors out of the way. So now I got to disconnect this pipe right here that goes down, and I need to disconnect this PCV nipple right here for the fresh air of the PCV. I got to be very careful not to break that. Ooh boy, okay. So there we go. Luckily they gave us a little flexible hose right there. And that's 7 millimeters, which usually it's 8. I like to switch it up on the turbo cars on us. Okay. There's that one. Now way back down here is the other. Just gonna need a little bit of extension to get down there, no big deal. And extensions really make life a lot easier. If you're trying to do this without an extension, it's not gonna be very easy. Now this car has not had much work done to it, I don't believe. So things may come off easy, may not. Panel popper tools work pretty well. Let's get this boot off here of the turbo inlet. Oh, fantastic. Did that tear? Is that just how that goes? All right, it's just how it goes. All right. For a second there, I thought it tore. Man, that's good. There we go. All right, here's our turbo inlet from the air filter. And then this air box just pops up. All right. So the air box is up and out of the way. All right, that gives us access to our engine mount and our belt drive and the front cover and everything. Now, to get these connectors off, a little pocket screwdriver does help. Comes in pretty handy. Take our intake cam solenoids. Now, these things are known to fail. They fail electrically and they also get clogged, but they're real easy to replace. So this wiring harness is kind of held to the valve cover with some 10mm bolts. So I'm going to go ahead and take those out. With one of my favorite tools, my trusty 10 on a stick from Snap-on. I don't know where else you could buy this tool from, but it is a very nice tool for doing engine work, especially on General Motors, pretty much any vehicle, because most manufacturers use 10mm. And I can't get to it. So I do have to take off this charge pipe right there, which is inverted Torx. All right, this is a E12, so an inverted 12 Torx. Because this is under a lot of pressure right here. All right, now on the other side of this tube, down here is a little clip, pocket screwdriver, and then can slide off. All right, so that pops back. There we go. There we go. And how does this pipe bolt on? I guess it's right here with this little 10mm. All right, so the charge pipe is now loose, which also is holding onto this radiator hose. Release the hose. All right, there we go. Notice there's a seal right there. You can reuse that as long as it's still good. All right, so now I can continue taking this wiring harness off. There we go, that loosens that all up. Now I can move it out of the way to where I can get to the valve cover. Now here's something unique to the turbo engines. Okay, the non-turbo engines have the PCV as part of the intake manifold. On the turbo versions, they have a PCV hose right here that runs off of here down to the turbo. Now, there is no way you can get a disconnect fitting in there on that, so you have to unbolt it from the bolt that's down there. So kind of stupid, but at the same time, it's just what you deal with. And that 10 on a stick makes short work of that. Okay, now I'm pretty much ready to take all the valve cover bolts off. clip. Just barely underneath. Okay. Ooh, this thing's still hot. Oh, there's another PCV hose. Oh no, that's part of that fresh air hose that runs up to the air inlet, all right? So that gives me the access that I need to get to the timing actuators. Ooh, there it is. All right, so this upper guide right here is supposed to have some plastic on the bottom side of it, and it is missing. So the plastic from that, I believe, is probably what was clogging those solenoids. So now, in order to get the front cover off, I'm going to have to take this front motor mount off, which is pretty simple. There's just some 15mm bolts that hold all that on. But you kind of need to put a jack underneath the oil pan and then slowly lower it down versus just letting the bolts go and your engine falling down. This engine mount has a ton of bolts. Okay. Okay, now I got some access to those 18mm bolts. Now there's one that's further down that's pretty difficult to get to, but this offset 18 should get me on that. It's gonna be fun to get that the whole way out. I might have to push the motor up a little further. All right, here's the lower part of the mount where it goes to the front. You can see now I have access to that tensioner pretty good. All right, belt tensioner, hopefully coming off. Yes, sir. Now this belt tensioner is kind of difficult to get on. You're gonna need either to get from the top or you need some weird offset 15 to get it because there's not much room there. But once you get it busted loose, you can get it off. It's almost easier to get it from the top once you remove the mount than it is from the bottom, but you can do it from the bottom. It's just very difficult to get to. You gotta have that, just the perfect tool. I'll try to put up a picture of what you would need if you were trying to do it from the bottom. But I got a new tensioner for this, and I got a new belt. So this belt right here has about 170 something thousand miles on it. Probably time to replace it. Now that's the crazy thing about belts nowadays. Or at least the belts that General Motors uses, don't really ever look that cracked, right? So this thing right here doesn't have any cracks in it. But this thing, I mean, like I said, it's got 170,000 miles on it. So we're going to put a new one on it. But really, it looks like it's in pretty good shape. Other than that weird noise it makes when you put it in reverse. So that's going to leave me pretty much with the balancer on the crankshaft, this idler pulley right there because it's blocking one of the front cover bolts, all the front cover bolts, and then I'll be able to get this out. Yeah, this timing chain, it's got some slack up there, but yeah, that guide is gone. All right, so I got an entire timing kit, which I'll show you here in a second, but this upper chain tensioner up there, this guide or chain guide, looks something like this. There's a piece of plastic that goes right there, which is gone on that one. So that plastic's been chewed up, spit out, and boot off stage into these cam solenoids, which come in the new kit that I got. Let me show you what I'm talking about. All right, so on Rock Auto, we purchased an entire cam or timing chain setup and everything This one, I'll put a link to the part in the description and everything. This is made by Chloe's, who I believe Chloe's actually makes the factory timing chains for these Ecotec engines. That's why I went ahead and went with this kit. However, this comes with both intake and exhaust cam actuators for the variable cam timing and a new bolt, which is good because you're supposed to replace this bolt anyway whenever you take it off to do the timing chains. So we got a new bolt and new actuator for each of those cams. So when you're sitting there going, man, do I replace all these components or not? Well, you can get a pretty good deal when you buy them. All right, whole new cam solenoid or cam actuator right there. You can get a pretty good deal when you buy them all as one big kit. So there's that one, and it tells you that this one is the intake. So that it's almost foolproof as long as you don't get them all mixed up. Same thing for the exhaust, right? So we got the exhaust side, and it doesn't even have it labeled. There's a belt tensioner, and then the rest of the timing chain kit right here that has all the guides, right? This is the black guide that I think is the one that also gets chewed up, that gets stuck in the cam solenoids. A new oil squirter right there. And it even comes with, wait for it, new cam solenoids, right? Because they usually get clogged with debris. So intake and exhaust cam solenoids. Obviously, it's got a new timing chain somewhere in this thing, and all the sprockets. Yep, there's the chain, right? All the sprockets and the timing chain tensioner that goes in the back of the head right there. So there's a lot of parts to this kit, and these engines actually have a balance shaft in them. So I also got the balance shaft chain and tensioner and all those, because those usually make some noise on the Ecotecs, especially if you have the 2.4. The 2.4 liter version, for some reason the balance shaft chain gets really pissed off and everything. Right. So there's a lot of bolts around the perimeter. There's a hidden 13 millimeter underneath where the water pump usually is. But I'll go ahead and take off a bunch of those 10s. Okay, so the nice thing about the Ecotec engines, General Motors made it easy on the balancer. So it's 21 millimeter. And you don't need a puller to get this off. Now it's going to make a liar out of me, but usually this pulls right off once you get this bolt out. And the balancer just slides right off. Now, there is a unique thing about these balancers. There is a keyway right here to drive the timing, right? But there's also these flats on the outside that are to drive the oil pump, because the oil pump is part of this front cover. So whenever we go back together, we have to make sure we get both of those two things lined up. Because if you only get the oil pump side lined up and you ram this thing in, that keyway is not lined up, it ruins the keyway. 13 to get this this idler pulley off. Got a new one of those. And 13 right there. For the front cover, and then all the rest of the front cover bolts that go around it. And the rest of those are 10s, so I can probably get them with a 10 on the stick. I should be the spokesperson for Snap-on for the 10 on the stick. If they want a spokesman, I can be that, because I really do like this thing. That front cover should be loose. I just need to make sure I catch the oil whenever I pull it off, because this thing is the oil pump underneath here, so oil does come. Let's see if I can catch it all without making a mess. Usually easier said than done. timing cover / oil pump is off. As you can see on the back side of this thing, how this is the oil pump. And that exposes our timing chains. All right, what are my timing chain guides looking like that I can see now? So you can see we do have a balance shaft chain right there. Ooh, look at that slack. All right, let me get you up in there. All right, so we have a lot of slack in that balance shaft chain that can contribute to a rattle noise. So good thing I have a new one of those. And my main timing chain, here's that black guide. So if you have, oh, it's broken, okay. So if you have black shavings in your cam solenoids, this guide, oh wow, okay, it's chewed up. Actually, I think there's a whole piece missing on it. Cool. All right, we're definitely fixing stuff this time. All right, so I need to get this thing moved to top dead center where we start timing it before we take it apart. It makes it a lot easier to go back together at the correct spots. So let me pull that timing diagram and everything up, make sure that I'm putting it in the right spot. It's been a minute since I've done it. Used to do one almost a couple times a week, but it's been a minute, so I'll double check and look it up. All right, in order to rotate the engine over, just take the original crankshaft bolt, stick it in there and spin it in. We can turn the engine over by the crankshaft bolt. Okay, before removing any of the camshaft timing components, we need to put the keyway that's at about 2 o'clock right now at 12 o'clock. And I need to make sure that my camshafts are in the right position to make sure I'm on top dead center compression stroke. All right, and only rotate clockwise. Don't rotate counterclockwise. All right, so that's at 12 o'clock. Now I need to make sure that the cams are at the right position because they could be 180 out and I gotta rotate the engine over a whole turn. Okay, perfect. Now, my crankshaft, the keyway is at 12 o'clock. My intake cam, there's a mark right there that's about 2 o'clock. And over here on the exhaust cam, I have a mark that's at about, I say 10 o'clock, and that is how it's supposed to be. So, my next thing I need to do is take off the timing chain tensioner, which the timing chain tensioner is on the back side of this head right there. Oh, fantastic. There's a bracket blocking it right now. So I got to remove this bracket. What's the bolts for that? All right, looks like it's just one 10mm bolt on the back side. Shouldn't be a big deal. And then it's like a 32mm socket or something huge in the back there for that timing chain tensioner socket. So I'm going to have to find a socket for that. I will also need to take off this plug right here to access the bolt for that the timing chain guide, which I'm not even sure that's not even really there. So that's going to be all broken up in there. So yeah, this thing will definitely run a lot better and sound a lot better than it did, which it's amazing how well it ran the way this timing chain stuff is. It's a good thing I'm doing this now. You know, I've only had the parts for 2 years. Take off this bolt that I can't see. That's where these swivel sockets really come in handy. The timing chain tensioner sticks into the back of the cylinder head right there and pushes on the guide that's on the back side. And it just screws in. So you can see it's a pretty good size hex right there. It is actually 1.25 inches to be able to get on that. So it's big. Luckily I had a new one. I suggest you get a new one of these. However, if you don't have a new one, you can reset this by pulling the snap ring right there and then pushing in and screwing this piece in. There's 2 pieces to it and you can reset them. And that is if you're not replacing it. All right, so now I just need to unscrew this from the back of the head here. It's easier said than done. There's a lot of junk in the way. Feels really tight. Ow! Oh, I just ran my collarbone into the hood. Ouch. Okay, got it loose. Whew. That sucked. That was really on there. All right, I should just unscrew a little bit. Now that it's loose, I can take it the rest of the way out with my fingers. However, I do need to break these bolts on the cam sprockets loose. There are flats here on the camshafts. You can grab a hold of those flats with a wrench, and I believe it's 24 millimeters. Let's see if that's right. Boom, 24 millimeters. And I believe those are 18s. You don't really want to be using an impact on this, but and you're supposed to replace these bolts. They are torque-heeled bolts. So we'll break those loose. Get on this one. And luckily with that kit that I got came with new bolts. So that's kind of the nice thing about that kit. I'll get on there. Okay. So now that I got those broken loose, I'm going to take the timing chain tensioner all the way out, which will then give me some slack, and then I'll be able to take those off. And because I put this engine at top dead center compression before I ever took them apart, once I go back together, I won't have to rotate anything. I just pretty much slap it together. So putting it at top dead center before you take it apart makes it easier for you whenever you go back together. Let me show you something. Here's my hot tip. All right, so notice this one is fully extended on the old timing chain tensioner. Whenever there's no tension on these things, it'll sit there and ratchet its way out. This one is in the reset position all the way back in. Like I said, you can take this snap ring out and you can reset this and reuse it. However, might as well just go ahead and replace it if it comes with the kit. So, all right, now that I've broken those cam sprocket bolts loose, I can just zip them off without worrying about jostling the camshafts. All right, and I need to take this upper guide off. All right, look, see this upper guide? There's no plastic left. You can see the chain was rubbing on the metal right there. That's not good. So I gotta take that piece off. Is it 10 millimeters? Yep, it's a 10 millimeter Allen, and it's extremely tight usually. So I'm gonna use a breaker bar. Okay. Like I said, it's really tight. Once it's broken loose, it's not too bad. All right, so we pull the plug out of the head, so then we can access the bolt that holds that upper timing chain guide in. It's a 10 millimeter. Not that it matters, because the upper part of that guide is not even there. I'll show you what I'm talking about once I get it out. Okay, so right here is the lower bolt for this guide. This is the broken guide. And this other one, this long one, is the one that goes to the tensioner. You can see the top of this guide right here is broken. Actually, a lot of this is broken. Oh my goodness. Let me go grab a new one and show you the difference. All right, so a lot of the junk that was clogging the cam solenoids, like I was saying, a bunch of black plastic, and the only black plastic in this engine is on this guide right here. And as you can see, we have a lot missing. You can see we have this piece that's missing. Also this entire top piece. I bet I find that in the oil pan. You can see a bunch of this is chewed off from the chain. Rubbing it. Oh yeah. Definitely need to replace these things. All right, now the other guide for the tensioner. This one's always fun to get out. I gotta go at the top, I can't remember. Come on, fit through there. Well, That's gonna have to go through the top. Now that I dropped the chain in the oil pan. Fantastic. There we go. Timing chain is out. Yep, and like I was saying, so I bought a kit from Chloe's, and here's why I think the original GM timing chains are made by Chloe's. I don't know if you can read that on that guide. It literally says Chloe's GM and a part number. You can see our two balance shafts right there that we're going to have to time for this balance shaft chain. So now to get the balance shaft chain and water pump chain off, I got to take off this tensioner and then all the guides, and then it can come off. Tensioner is pretty easy, just a couple bolts. So I got all new balance shaft chain and everything. You want to, oh great, make sure you catch these so they don't go in the oil pan. Okay, balance shaft chain is off now. It's real simple. Just a little oil passage right there with a little nozzle that sprays oil out of it. If you don't replace this, it could be clogged, causing damage to the timing chains. And according to the Chloe's timing chain kit, it says this new nozzle has a redesigned nozzle to provide higher flow rate characteristics to increase oil flow to the timing chain under low RPMs. Okay, well, I guess they just made the hole bigger is my guess. So a little different size of the hole here, but nothing real crazy. All right, I'm gonna torque that to 106 inch-pounds. Time for the chain and tensioners for the balance shafts. Now the balance shaft chain is difficult to get on if you don't have the tensioner, or if you have the guides in there, it's hard to get on. So you got to pretty much install it without the guides, and then install the guides. And then the tensioner goes on last. There is a dark colored link, a gold colored link, and another dark colored link. So this one right here is the unique colored link. It goes on the intake sprocket over there. So the intake balance shaft sprocket is going to be this unique link, and there's an arrow on this thing. So there's a little arrow right there is where the unique colored link goes. Okay, that's on. So this is going to be the other link, the dark link right there, but I got to get also around the water pump. Now the water pump doesn't have to be timed. You just put it on anyway. You can see down here at the bottom, this one's going to go lined up with this mark right here. All right, so okay, there we go. Now, when you put this on, it's a tight fit, so it shouldn't be very easy to get on. But let's verify right here. Okay, so up there at the top, you can see the gold is lined up with that line, or that arrow. Over here, the dark one's lined up with the arrow, and then we're lined up with the dot on the dark one down here. So now we just got to put some guides on it. Yeah, so this chain has to be timed, because if these balance shafts are out of time, then it's going to do the exact opposite of balance your engine. It's going to unbalance your engine, And then you're gonna have some serious vibration issues. All right, so this guide can go in here. And this one's gonna go like that. Then I just gotta torque all those down. There we go. Always double check them all. All right. So yeah, you can see how close this chain comes to this part of the block right there. And so whenever it's tight, you're good. But if that thing's loose and it can rub on the block, that's what you hear a lot on like the Equinox and Terrains that have the 2.4. This balance shaft chain, for some reason, I don't know. Maybe it's because it's a 2.4 and a little bit bigger, so maybe they have different balance shafts, I guess, maybe with different masses. But it kind of stretches this little chain out a little bit and it rubs right there. So I don't know. But I don't think I've ever seen it on a 2.2 or a 2.0 like this one. But with high mileage, those guides, that plastic gets brittle. So it's got a new tensioner here with a grenade pin in it, holding it in. So you just got to get this up in here and torque it down. All right, and I will torque down the tensioner too. So I'm always torquing everything on the inside of an engine. Anything that's a gasket or something like that, it's getting torqued. Critical fasteners get torqued. Like a motor mount, maybe not, but these will. So now once we get it all on there, pull the grenade pin. And then once there's some oil pressure behind that piston in that tensioner, boom, it'll be nice and tensioned. All right, so there's the balance shaft chain. Next one is going to be the actual timing chain for the cams. All right, now the timing chain guide comes out the top. You see a little bit of wear there on that one. That one's not too bad. It's just all the ones on this side, because this is the tensioner side. So it doesn't get nearly as worn as this one was on the right side. All right, so we got our kit that's got all new guides and everything in it. So I'm gonna go ahead and slap this one in. I'll be able to just slide it on down, hopefully. There we go. And the chain, there's a weird boss in the head, or maybe it's the block, that this thing barely fits past. All right, so there's no colored links on that side. There is on this side. Notice, again, we have two dark ones and a light colored one. The light colored one, just like it was on the balance chain, goes on the intake cam sprocket. So I'm gonna drop this in. So we'll just kind of hang it up on there for now. I'll go get that other guide and I'll get it kind of routed about approximately where it needs to go. There we go. All right, now this other guide can slide up in there. Now this part reaches over the top of the chain. So now I got to get these cam sprockets on. I'll start with the intake camshaft, because the intake's up here at the front. This front one is the intake camshaft. And the unique colored link, as they call it, is going to line up with this mark on this sprocket here. Also on the back side of the sprocket is this little dowel pin that fits in this little recess in the camshaft. You see how it's almost at 6 o'clock? This is going to be roughly close to that. I'm going to have to move the camshaft with a wrench to get that to slide in. All right, boom, that one locked in. And make sure that this cam sprocket seats all the way into that dowel. If it doesn't, then it's going to be really screwed up. So you got to really make sure that those things are lined up. And I got my unique colored link right there. I'll go check down on my crankshaft to make sure it's right. I'm going to have to make a little adjustment here in a second, but I'm going to get this bolt in here into the guide. Now I need to put the exhaust cam sprocket on there. And same thing, there's a colored link on there that's going to match up with the mark on this camshaft sprocket. So, same thing, you got a little dowel and it's pretty much facing down on that cam right now, so that's going to go like this. And then you can see there's a little notch right here in this gear that's going to line up with the colored tooth on that. So, get this put in there. Okay, that lines up with that. And it looks like I need to rotate my cam just a little bit. There it goes. All right, so that one's engaged. It slid on. Mark's lining up, Mark's lining up. Okay, then I gotta look at the torque spec on these and tighten them down. Okay, now General Motors service information tells me that I should actually have this tensioner in there before we torque these down. Now these bolts right here get torqued down to 22 foot-pounds plus 100 degrees. Okay, and this tensioner just slides into the back of the cylinder head and it tightens up. Also, whenever we get it tight, then we have to release this tensioner and set it, activate it, which is what General Motors calls it. So we push down on it with like a hammer or something, and I'll show you that. This is all by feel because it's the back of that cylinder head there, and there's a bracket in the way on this engine. On the other Ecotec, there's no bracket in the way. There we go. Way down there, that timing chain and that guide are being pushed on by the tensioner. Now, this tensioner is not activated yet. And I've seen before where people start it up after they put it all back together and the thing rattles. So you have to activate it. And so what I do is I take a wooden hammer handle, stick it down on there, and give it a hit. So that hit right there should push down on this, release it, and then let it come out. All right, now I need to torque these 22 foot-pounds plus 100 degrees. Okay, there's our 22 foot-pounds. Now 100 degrees on each of these. But you got to make sure that the cam does not spin whenever you're turning this. So 100 degrees is a little over 90, obviously, so it's a little over a quarter turn. I'm going to have to ratchet it. All right. Same thing for this one. degrees. Now I just got to put our new guide up here on the top with some bolts. And these are like 89 inch-pounds, I believe, on the torque on these. 9. And I'll put new cam solenoids in because I got a couple of those. All right, so as I put the timing cover back on, there's a spot where the lower block half meets the actual block right there, and I'm gonna have to put a little dab of silicone right there. Now there's a little spot on the gasket that lines up with that. That's where the, well, I guess it's right there on that side. That's gonna go on there because you don't want, at that seam, you don't want it leaking. So it just takes a tiny dab of silicone. So just a tiny little dab will do it. Right there on that seam. So as far as installing this timing cover here, I got a new gasket. However, since I have the engine mount installed in there, this gasket, it has a little piece that goes right there to there. If you cut that off, you can get it in there with the engine mount in. If not, then you have to take the engine mount off again. But I put the engine mount up there because I was dropping the cradle down and doing the lower block halves. So the gasket sits on those dowels, and the front timing cover with oil pump assembly, boom, can go on there. And install the bolts to hold it all in. Now it sits on some dowels, so once you get one bolt in there, you should be pretty good. So I've got the front cover on, I've got my new belt tensioner and my new idler pulley. However, getting this balancer on is tricky. All right, we have these flats that go into the flats for the oil pump, but then also we need to make sure this keyway right here lines up with the keyway that I could see is about 1230. So first I need to get the oil pump drive lined up. There we go. And then I need to make sure it lines up. There we go. See how it slid all the way down by hand? Now it's all the way in. If I just had, say, the oil pump drive lined up like that, and then I rammed the bolt home, which is possible to do, you know, it would damage the keyway of the crankshaft. So you need to make sure that that goes all the way in before you tighten up this bolt. And the torque spec on this bolt I will put on the screen, or it's quite a few ugga-duggas. All right, so I'm gonna go back up top. I'm gonna put that motor mount back on so it lifts up this engine off the cradle. I'll put the belt on. And then I just need to put the valve cover gasket, or valve cover on, and put that back together. So getting the valve cover on, pretty simple and straightforward. Just put the bolts in and tighten them up. And the torque spec on them, I believe, is 89 inch-pounds. Let me double check. Yep, 89 inch-pounds is the torque spec on those. So I always just start them with the electric impact. And 89 inch-pounds is not really that much. So just snug them down. And we'll finish them off with the torque wrench. All right, now I just got to put everything back that I took off. All right, so that's looking good. About all I got are ignition coils, and I got this intake pipe that goes to the turbo right there. All right, I got all the things put back together that I took apart. And we'll go ahead and start it up, make sure everything's good, make sure no timing chain rattler, hopefully doesn't jump timing or anything. Oh yeah. Now we're talking. Burn like a kitten. All right. Now, you know how to do the timing chains on your Ecotec.